Hello everyone, and we're back to more for Top 5 in the Black Shadow. This is a series on the channel where we take a particular subject for Dune Imperium and I give my top 5 tips and tricks to help improve your game. We are here at the last of the leaders for Dune Uprising, Staban Tuek. This is going to be an interesting one. There is a lot going on here, and again, I'll do my best to be as concise with my information as possible. Probably won't be able to include everything I'd like to in this, but Staban is basically, to me, Dire Wolf saying, I dare you. I dare you to pick this leader and to see what happens. A fascinating prospect. Someone that, when the game first came out, I did say potentially is the best leader in the game. And I do think when things are rock and rolling for Staban, he is the strongest leader in the game, although he has a lot more complication than someone like a Gurney Halleck, for example, which is the downside. But yeah, a fascinating proposition to play. Definitely not beginner-friendly by any stretch of imagination. So let's have a look at Staban. So Staban Tuek has probably got the highest skill cap of any leader in this game. Might not be the highest bar to be clearing, but Staban's just like on another level in that respect. Probably the best ring in the game and a very decent passive 2 in Smuggle Spice. However, we can't avoid the fact of limited allies and the fact that Staban starts with no diplomacy in his deck whatsoever. A card that is very key to a lot of strategies and is taken for granted by pretty much everyone else. Staban just doesn't have it. It just has Seek Allies, 1 use, and that's it. You lose all faction access outside of whatever else you can produce. It means that Staban has to play the game completely differently to anyone else. It also does affect how sometimes players react to what you do, and we'll talk a bit more about that later on as well. But it's this fascinating prospect of, if we give you a really crazy ring and a pretty solid passive with that, can you overcome the fact that you have no faction access to start with for the game? Well, we're going to try. So we'll start off with the easy part, and that is Staban's other passive here, Smuggle Spice. Whenever another player sends an agent to a make a board space that you are spying on, you get a spice. This is pretty simple, and by far the simplest part really for Staban here. If you manage to get a spy to any of these locations, however you do so, you can change whenever anyone else goes to one of these spots. Not you, but anyone else goes to them, you get a spice for free in your economy. So, very obvious play here, and one you'll see most of the time with Staban players, is that they will look to get their spy on the Haggard Basin space. The reason is this is a very busy space. This is the main way people will generate makers to get into combat, which means that whenever leaders are getting involved or fighting, which they're going to be doing a lot of the time, you are generating spice here, and that you're typically gonna get a spice pretty much every single round. Very effective. Sometimes Staban will go there immediately if he's scared that another leader like a Fade Ralph or someone else might put a spy there. It's one of the most competitive spots in the entire game. Of course, you can put your spies to both Imperial Basin and Deep Desert, but these are a lot more situational, and you've kind of got to assess the game state. Imperial Basin can net you a lot more spice than you reckon, and leaders like, say, if Lady Jessica's in the game, she will be going here a lot more, especially if she's going for a very particular sort of strategy. So you can take advantage of that. Deep Desert, obviously no one's getting here immediately. It's going to take a couple of rounds. So you definitely see, like with Staban players, their first action might be to send a spy somewhere else, and when they play their Sing the second time, putting a ring there, because by that point there's a couple of spices been built up. It's not likely that Staban's getting to Deep Desert anytime soon, so it's a way for him to at least try and get some kind of passive income off his opponents. But again, it's all about timing and tempo and kind of how you see it. So you've just got to assess the game state and sort it from there. So let's talk about limited allies in a bit more detail. The fact that you start off with absolutely no diplomacy in your deck. This is meant to reflect the fact that Staban is a spice smuggler, and the fact that he simply doesn't have all these connections to factions that the other great houses has. As you can see, Staban here has no house tag to him whatsoever, because that's not his deal. But as far as game implications are concerned, I cannot overstate how insignificant it is that you don't have a diplomacy card. It is such a fundamental backbone of so many normal strategies in this game, of people trying to get friendships, that you run as all of them for Staban, not really an option. Staban can never go Fremen and like look to get hooks early, Siege and Haggard Basin, almost impossible for him. You know, and stuff like getting deliver supplies for shipping, Dutiful, Imperial Bridge, all of this is basically out for him at the start of the game, and you've got to basically make it up a little bit out of your own creativity. It is incredibly important. It does mean, of course, you've still got your Seek Allies, though. So where you decide to send that Seek Allies in the first round is a very, very big decision. Typically, it's going to come down to either deliver supplies or maybe one of the Fremen spots. You definitely see Staban go deliver supplies a lot. That extra water is nice. A way for him maybe to get to something like research station, or maybe pay for some gathering support to go for some mid-round conflict, stuff like that. It's also a bump towards the spacing. Staban really would love to get to shipping if he can, because the fact that he's got no faction assets, he needs to find other ways of getting these friendships. Shipping is a very obvious way of doing that. So deliver supplies at least gets him half the way there. There are a couple of other options as well. Some conflicts do have faction access on them, so maybe there's a way for you to target a couple of these. Probably not without worms, but this can also be an option for you to try and supplant some bumps. The other main thing you're going to be doing is focusing on the Imperium row as well, and obviously getting your faction access from cards like Truth, Trance, Guild Envoy, Treacherous Maneuver, stuff like that, and also obviously cards that have spy access as well, because of course this goes into the Unseen Network ability. So for tip 3, it is Unseen Network, and it is arguably the best ring of the entire game. Being able to have guaranteed spy generation to anywhere on the board that you desire is incredibly powerful, and is something that you should not take for granted. But there are some interesting caveats with Unseen Network. So there are a couple of extra bonuses that you can potentially enable if you place your spy with your ring, and only with your ring. Doesn't count for any other spy generation you get. I do see people get this wrong. If you choose to place a spy on one of the Landrad spaces, particularly this one here or here, you can, while you're sending the spy there, convert a spice even into free Solari. And if you send your ring to any of the factions, you can pay a couple of Solari for an intrigue. Both of these are very, very important and very powerful, and also useful at different times during the game here. So, very, very common route you'll see Staban players will do is that they might well send their initial spy up to this space here, having already got hold of some spice. So maybe like Imperial Basin, maybe Hagar Basin, maybe they've got some reward from conflict, which lets them do that in round 2. Because what they want to do is try and get the Swordmaster very early, because Staban can be very effective at doing that. In theory of Staban, a route you could look to take is use your water to go Hagar Basin, get 2 spice, and then go to Spice Refinery. You convert 1 spice for 4, you convert your other spice for 3 here, and suddenly you've got 7 Solari and your spy at Swordmaster. You just got to find a coin from anything else, contract, space, reward, a re-chip to Spice Refinery, anything like that, and you can get your Swordmaster immediately, and no one can stop you. This is a very obvious route the Staban can take. The good thing for Staban is that not a lot of people will necessarily block it, though, because for them to block it, they've got to go Spice Refinery, and for most leaders, it's not a great spot at the beginning of the game if they also don't have Spice, which if you're going Hagar Basin, it's very unlikely that they do, so it's kind of like they'll be slowing you down, but they're also kind of not helping themselves a ton. But be careful, because if that is what you go for, and you do get blocked, you got to work out where you're setting that ring. So a quick mention for Staban's ring to these factions. This is something that you're typically going to be doing in the middle of the game, usually after you've already acquired your Swordmaster. Getting your ring, your spies to faction spots is great anyways, and being able to pay a couple of spies for an intrigue on the spot is also really good as well. But you've got to bear in mind that by round 3, round 4, round 5, that some of these spots, if not all of them, could well be taken if the likes of Guild Spy are out there, Bene Gesserit Operative, Fade Ralpha can just send his spies here whenever he wants, basically. Stuff like that. So you can't necessarily expect to get hold of the intrigues here, or at least get hold of the access. Maybe in the final round, as people use their spies to get extra card draw, you might be able to sneak an extra intrigue in. But you can't really be putting your spies there early, because it needs to go to Hagar Basin. It needs to go here, or maybe even here as well, just to get your initial engine going. And Staban does not have a lot of flexibility in that early game. So if you can make some benefit of that later on, fantastic. So for tip number 4, we're going to talk about seat position. And I actually reckon that Staban is surprisingly robust in wherever he gets sat at. The one thing you've got to bear in mind, though, is a big factor of your choosing is going to be the Imperium row. Staban obviously is very reliant on there being faction access or spy access, so if there's none of those in the opening row, maybe you should give Staban a pass. But if he is in the row, then you've got a couple of options here. I do think that inherently having him say sort of like 3rd or 4th position is not too bad. The idea being that you're then trying to get hold of like a cheap 2nd or 3rd place. I think it's really important for Staban to try and get something out of the opening conflict. There's a couple of leaders I don't think it's that relevant for. but Staban needs to get resources going as soon as possible to pay for stuff like his ring and other stuff that he's going to want to do, trying to get access to shipping and that sort of stuff. The other thing you've got to bear in mind is you must have a plan for Staban when you choose him of if you're going to draw his Seek Allies card and if you don't. Obviously, it's something that's completely out of your control. You've got a 9-card deck, so you're more likely to pick up your Seek Allies than not. But of course, the one thing you don't want to do is Staban Tuek, for example, is take him in seat 1 saying, all right, I'm going to send my faction access to Fremkit, I'm going to do a big draw, or go Desert Tactics to fight the opening conflict, and then you don't draw it, and then you don't know what to do. So you've got to be very conscious and having 2 specific plans. If you pull your Seek Allies and if you don't. Otherwise, you're just asking for trouble with a leader. You have to kind of play a bit methodically, and you've got to really plan ahead with what you're attempting to do. But 100% tip number 5 for Staban has got to be look at the Imperium Road before you consider taking Staban. It is absolutely key to your chances what the road looks like and what you're going to do about it. So here's just a random road that I've just basically put together here to give you kind of an idea. You've got to bear in mind, again, you have no diplomacy card in your hand. You've got to find a way to secure your friendships. So you're going to be probably reliant on a lot of Imperium Road cards for going for it. So cards like Truth Trance, for example, are obvious. This is basically just diplomacy. You just pay for persuasion for. Great card for Staban, much better for him. It's good for anyone else, but for Staban, obviously, it's fantastic. There's Veritas as well. Guild Envoy is a persuasion cheaper, that you have to discard another card to play it. And you've also got Treacherous Maneuver, which is one more, although if you can play that with an Emperor card, which you trash, you can turn it into a double bump. It's pretty rare you get that, though, but the same general theme. Now, this is where the byplay and the mind games between experienced people who've played this a lot happens when Staban is in the game. When Staban gets chosen, it's because he's probably targeting a specific card or a couple of cards in the row. So stuff like Truth Trance, your Spy cards, Public Spectacle, Strike Fleet, all that sort of stuff here. They're obvious targets for Staban, but they're also obvious targets for Staban in that everyone else can see that he's going for those cards. And this is where the games begin. So just to take 2 admittedly extreme examples here, if you're playing as Staban and your opening row looks something like this, you are basically just leaving your fate up to the gods, because this is such a good card for you, obviously, but it's such a good card for everyone, and everyone can see that if that goes, there's no faction access out there, and you are going to be reliant on whatever comes out of the deck. So if they can take that away from you and another non-faction access card comes out and no spy card comes out, what are you going to do? You're kind of left completely stranded. Even though, like, some of these cards, Paracompass, Capture Mentat, Tread, these are all pretty decent cards. I'm not saying they're bad or anything. But, of course, if you're going on drafting and your opening row looks something a bit more, say, like this, well, suddenly there's not a lot of pressure on you, because all of these cards are going to be used for you in some form or another, either with the access or the spy access, being able to generate spies for other reasons, being able to just pay spice for bumps, which you're obviously going to be generating at stuff like Hagar Basin and these spy locations, stuff like that. So you must be very, very vigilant of what the Imperium deck is, and you've got to be prepared for a couple of different ways things can go down. If you take Staban and Faction Limited, you are going to have to almost certainly give up an action, maybe even both of them, just to secure the access to what you need. So you've got to kind of set some internal prices of what you're going to do. But if you make it work, then with the ring in hand, you can make a ton of progress in a game and be really, really challenging to win it. So it's the double-edged sword of Staban. You know what you're getting yourself into with no diplomacy, and this is the fun and games that await. But that's going to do it for this video here for top 5, and I hope that's a bit of advice there for Staban so that you can use the tips and tricks you use to get a bit of success in this game. As I say, very, very tricky to use, but can be a lot of fun. And when you get him going, especially if you can somehow get cards like Overthrow, for example, just completely transform it. Like if you can get even just the Truth Trance, and basically you just ignore limited allies, you're left with basically just your ring and Smuggle Spice. Very, very capable, leading to a lot of good stuff. But again, things can go horribly wrong if you don't secure that early faction access, or 1 or even 2 people reveal ahead of you, which can definitely happen, and some people will do that. You've got to have a backup plan, or just get lucky with draws. And sometimes a bit of luck, never goes too far. I gotta say, I've really enjoyed making these videos. It's been a lot of fun here. You know, trying to condense a lot of information down to 10 to 15 minutes per video is difficult. There's so much to talk about some of these leaders. There are several of these videos where I've actually cut some stuff out I was going to talk about just to keep the time down. But it's been a lot of fun. And if you guys have enjoyed this sort of content, then let me know. It's a big game, a lot of stuff to talk about, and I'm sure there's some other topics that we can look to cover. But other than that, of course, if you do like what we do here on the channel, please feel free to follow and support us. It'd be hugely appreciative. And with any luck, you might see more for the top 5 series. Take care of yourselves, everyone. We'll see you soon.